So now we've got why do we play games? Now let's talk about the return of recess. And here's where I put my false teeth in. Back in my day, when you went to school twice a day, maybe even 3 times a day, you got released from class to go and just do fun things in the class, out in the playground. Well, the recess was there for more than one reason, and we have completely obliterated the reason for recess. And I am here to advocate for the return of recess, because the first thing it gives is it gives the students a break. When you are trying to teach somebody something, it is difficult for them to catch on to what you're trying to convey when you just keep hammering, and you're changing subjects, and you just keep hammering. Because there are some people that will learn under that kind of crucible. There are other people that actually learn by sitting back and going, oh, that's what the teacher was talking about. I now see the equation. I see how it fits together. I see why, we should be following this concept of American civics or whatever. This concept of recess lets the brain disengage for a period of time so that the body can use that time to enjoy itself, let the blood flow through the system, wake somebody up. Arguably, if you make it so that the recess is something that's done physically as well, for example, go out to the playground, you're not going to sit on your keister during this recess. No, you're going to go and engage with other people in a physical act outside, whether it be dodgeball or running to the fence and back, or running away from the girls, or whatever the different nuances that were there in the period. The idea of the recess, first of all, gives a physical release and a break from the action. The second thing that the recess does is it gives a break to the teacher. One of the biggest drum beats that I remember coming up is that teachers are not paid enough. And in a large part, I would agree with that. But I have to tell you, the teachers that I know of that were paid the best were not necessarily the best teachers. They were the ones who complained the most, the ones who always had a reason for more money and things like that. And the downside to that is that the real thing that teachers need is support, and a recess process, an organized process where you had somebody who was the monitor that was, taking care of recess. One teacher, each day they rotated through or whatever. That teacher's was not given that break on that day, but the other 4 days of the week, they would get the break. So the idea of the concept of the return to recess means to give the teachers a break. And that gives the educator the processing time for the things that happen in each period. But it also gives the participants the time to process. So that's 2. The third reason why we need a recess is that we are physical beings. I know when I was a youngster, when I was a kid, my parents weren't quite the helicopter parents that people are today. But as far as I got to be doing this, and I got to be doing this, and I'd be doing this, and I'd be doing this, all eats up the time and literally puts the child in a state of paralysis because they don't have any time for themselves. And a recess lets them, in that limited amount of time, with those restrictions, they have the ability to be alone with themselves and can access that period in a way that is healthy, because they're not just intellectually stimulated, but now they're also physically stimulated. Now, in today's world, this may be a problem because we are so worried about injuries and illness. And the reality is that the world was a messier place. I know that I was not part of this, but I know there were families who did chickenpox parties where once there was a chickenpox outbreak in an area, they actually would farm their kids to those places to get the kids to get the chickenpox so they could get over it and go on with life. And this is not a great strategy. I'm not a medical person by any stretch. I don't even play a doctor on TV, although I sometimes have to role play one from time to time. But the idea is that the return to recess is going to give the participants some healthy reaction and get them out of the classroom for a minute. The next thing, and this is really important, I can't emphasize this enough. We as human beings need social interaction. Now, you're watching me on YouTube, you're watching me on Twitch, and so yeah, I get that there is a social networking process. There's a mechanism where socializing can occur in a enclosure, in a closed space, in a limited way. But I'm talking about a recess, and that's I have to go out into that playground, and I have to deal with the very kid that was a bully to me when I came to school in the morning. I can't tell you how many times I had that dread. But the reality is that you have to learn to process that, just like you have to process the concept of loss. Now, I know I'm actually hoping for it. Please, if you've got an adverse opinion on this, I'd love to see the comment. Please tell me that you think it's a bad thing for people to have to learn to deal with loss. Because I can tell you, as a man who has lost much, losing something when you are younger prepares you for the greater losses in life like nothing else. I lost a daughter in 1997, and I'm not going to go into that story, but just know that the challenges I had as a little boy dealing with being bullied and dealing with the tough kid on the street who didn't like the way I looked, or the person who knew that I would have to give him my lunch money if I didn't want to have, a smushed face before 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I learned to lose back then so that the loss of my daughter was something that I could cope with. And our coping skills depend on our ability of handling social interaction face to face, person to person, one-on-one, or group on, whatever. We need to be able to get in a situation where we can resolve those things in a personal way, in a collective way. And the only way we can do that is to think of a period of time within our day that is our recess, where we are intentionally going to go and engage with people, even if particularly those people are people we don't necessarily agree with. We have to learn how to present our case in a rational way, understand and accept what their position is, whether we agree or not, and we need to be able to have a conversation and a conciliatory tone. So this will lead into the next part. So let me move. We're getting ready to go to the rant, so I have to watch my clock here. We're getting up close on it, but the return to recess gives us a break, a healthy break, a break both on the teaching and the learning, and it makes us engage socially in uncomfortable situations